What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a Ctrl-Screen podcast. This one is number 4.
And, it's been a while since we did a podcast, but...
Quite a while.
We were pretty busy. This time we remembered to record them, too. Hit the record button.
Yep.
Anyway.
There may or may not have been a few mishaps, because we are clearly professionals.
We got the mic to prove it in the software.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. We kind of wanted to just do a sort of improv podcast.
Yeah.
Which is typically what they all are, but this one we wanted to have a whole lot less structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of see where the conversation goes. So the main topic that we really wanted to talk about was like franchises and how this could be in any form of media and how like they struggle like significantly over time, like as they have to attempt to adapt, and then sometimes they have to go back to their old ways when the fans or consumers don't like what they're doing.
Well, and that's the thing that I think a lot of companies struggle with is that, you're never going to please every single fan out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whenever it comes to games in particular, you have your yearly releases, Call of Duty, and
it's
recently,
becoming Battlefield.
Battlefield, I guess, and then Assassin's Creed is another one that people complain about.
Mm-hmm. And
the problem with releasing yearly or having those come out so soon is that they get stuck on they're not able to innovate their properties enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the main complaint with a lot of Assassin's Creed games, is that they just essentially were the same game every single year. And that was like the joke with Call of Duty. It's like, Call of Duty is the same game every year. They just slap their skins on.
I remember that was like a huge topic when Modern Warfare 3 came out,
Mm-hmm.
is that it was like a carbon copy of Modern Warfare 2, which in a lot of ways it absolutely was.
But I mean, then it comes into, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because Modern Warfare 2 was such a great game, or at least for me, I love that game.
I mean, commercially, it was a huge success. So I'd say it was. I mean, there were like stylistically, a lot of things were the same between those two games in particular. But then again, they added a couple different things that were pretty well received, like the specialist perk stuff, and support didn't go over too well. But
So I mean, this is where the problem of innovation comes in handy, because if you're releasing every year, you're pressured to.
It's hard to be innovative,
right? You have to create something new every single year, and then that's how you end up with robots in space. And now, for some reason, I personally I hate the idea. I just got finished playing Black Ops 3, and it was the most miserable experience of my life, just because I hate that genre. And it just feels like they're jumping the shark. Like, that's not why I play Call of Duty games, and that's why I feel like a lot of times whenever they're forced into innovating and forced to go way out there, then it's like, well, you need to kind of dial it back and bring it back to your roots.
They polarize their player base a lot when they do stuff like that, when they force a change on the consumers, which is why it kind of sucks that they're packaging COD 4 Remastered with Infinite Warfare, which I think is a terrible decision. We've talked about it before.
I don't know if we talked about it on a podcast. I think we talked about it together.
Yeah, but it's not a good idea, because like it's just bad marketing in general.
I don't think it's necessarily... It's a bad PR, or it's a bad move in the sense of fan service. Like, you're not making people happy that they have to buy this game they don't want in order to get COD 4 Remastered, the game they do want. But in the sense of trying to push unit sales and trying to get people to buy the new Call of Duty after it got that shitstorm of a first trailer, most disliked trailer of all time. That was their way of saying, hey, you don't like this game, but you're going to pay $20 extra to get the game you really want remastered.
Yeah.
And, that's something, it's a really shitty thing to do, but at the same time, some guy behind a desk was crunching numbers like, people will probably pay $20 extra just to get this game. And if we force them to buy our new game, it's going to make our sales look great, and it's going to push it up.
From, like, the standpoint of the company, it's a good idea, in theory. But in terms of, like, the actual consumer, it's not what you want. Especially when, like, it's going to end up cannibalizing the player base, because they're going to have to choose between Infinite Warfare and
that's a really
COD
good
4
point.
Remastered.
That's a good point.
So that's going to be a huge thing that will... The statistics of the company is going to completely overlook stuff like that, because they're just going to look at unit sales, especially like when the actual trailer came out. It's like, oh, look how many, we're getting so much engagement. They said that when there were so many dislikes.
Well, that's PR spin.
But it kind of plays into that when you have to do damage control instead of having to move forward with stuff. So there's no good way to do it. and we probably sound like we're sort of just like disgruntled about like the
Well, I
way
mean,
the franchise is.
Well, I mean, we don't have to stick on maybe Call of Duty because I mean that's kind of like a sore point where you either really love it or you really hate it. I used to really love it, and I really want to love it.
Yeah.
But right now I really hate it.
Yeah.
I just hate the direction they're going in, and you know it's one of those things that Activision is a very large company now. Because they have 3 different studios, they have essentially 3-year development cycles.
Yeah.
So,
which kind of sucks because if they're all like in the same plane, which I think is what kind of happened with like these futuristic exosuit generic stuff. There was Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, and then there's going to be Infinite Warfare.
And I think this is what happened is, you know, someone went out and did the market research, like, okay, what kind of FPSs are people looking for? And I don't remember the year Titanfall would have gone into development, but I assume it would have been the same year that Advanced Warfare did.
Yeah, and I think it was close to it.
So they would have both gone into development at the same time. And so then you have Infinity Ward, who was working on Ghost, which which didn't have any exosuit, but that was in development before Advanced Warfare.
Yeah.
And then you have Black Ops 2, which was also exo, and then
it was futuristic, but it was still pretty grounded.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, like it's just like they saw the market research, and then they're predicting and hoping 3 years down the line that it's still going to be popular.
Yeah. And
I mean, you can argue that it still kind of is because Titanfall 2 is coming out this year. And people, I guess, are excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing was I think Titanfall like helped to really push this new movement system, which has become a game in and of itself, just trying to get to different places using the movement system. And I guess that's like it's positive growth in the sense that we're changing things up, we're getting people engaged in this new stuff. But at a certain time, it just gets so stale. It gets so static.
Well, it's not that, but it's like that's not. If I wanted to play a futuristic movement shooter, I'd play Titanfall. If I want to play a fast-paced gun game with close maps and close quarters and quick gun battles, I'm going to Call of Duty. If I'm playing more tactically, I want to think about my moves. I want to play with a team. I'm playing Battlefield. Like these FPSs, they have niches, and it seems like Call of Duty is trying to move in on a certain niche.
Well, they're trying to move in on everyone's kind of. In a way, they're trying to move in on every single one of them because the maps have gotten smaller in certain games, and then they've gotten bigger, like way bigger, and then they've changed this whole movement system. It's like they're disconnected with the fan base now, honestly, to the point, even though the fan base is pretty goddamn vocal.
Well, vocal, but you have to pay attention to. There's a very vocal minority in every single community, and they're going to be the ones that hate whatever you're selling. So you have to look at unit sales, and actually, I think I still have them up. So as soon as they started doing these futuristic stuff, like the unit sales pretty much fucking plummeted, which should be telling. But I don't know why they haven't seen that pattern and try to maybe we should kind of go back to what people liked before.
And it might just be like that they do realize it and they recognize it, but of course they'll never tell the public, otherwise they'll look weak.
Right.
Which at the same time they look weak, but then they also help to do like this damage control severely. So honestly, I think we're gonna get off the COD train in about a second, but I think that the next Call of Duty game that's gonna be coming out after Infinite Warfare, I think it's gonna be either World War II.
I hope not.
Or somewhat modern. I think they're going to call
World
it World War II. I think that's what it's going to be.
No, it can't be because it's not Treyarch. I think the World at War would stay with Treyarch if they ever did.
Isn't Treyarch the next one doing
that?
No, it's Sledgehammer, isn't
it? Sledgehammer.
Okay.
So it would be Advanced Warfare 2 or whatever property.
Maybe they'll just call it Warfare.
I don't know.
Either way, I think that you're right where they play the niche role. And Call of Duty is extremely casual, and there's other games that are doing similar things in the sense where they're trying to innovate, where they don't necessarily need to. But I think that if they stick to their niche, and then they sort of advance, but not to the point where they're changing entire game mechanics, that's when they'll start to really hit their stride.
Yeah, because right now it's just getting to be too much stuff going on.
Because I thought that you had that statistic pulled up where the chart was going up significantly from game to game to game, and it was going up with this sort of static niche, like even between like World at War and Warfare 3. They're pretty similar games in the way that they're played. It's just like the different specific things in those games change that. There's not this crazy new advancements that kind of take players out of the game.
Right.
So,
and I think that same thing kind of translates into the movie field too, because we're seeing the same thing kind of happen with superhero movies, where Marvel started off and
I'd say TV shows are becoming more popular than the movies right now.
And I think TV shows have their specific niche, and it's kind of like its own thing. And I think TV shows can kind of be put into a separate superhero genre. Like I think the movie superhero genre will die out before the TV shows.
No, I'm saying that like the movie genre is doing like much better right now.
Okay.
Not necessarily commercially, but in terms of like reception wise.
Right, definitely. Because
I think it's because it works really well with the genre in the sense that like you get a comic book, you read it this month, and then you get the next one the next month.
Well, I mean, with TV show wise, then.
Yeah, with TV shows, it's like, oh, this happens this episode, and then I can just watch the next one, and then it'll be this next individual story.
Yeah.
Or it'll wrap into that story somehow. Whereas you don't have to go through such a huge freaking development into like a movie.
Right.
Because there's so many elements. A lot of them aren't completely necessary, but it's becoming more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming more mainstream. It is the mainstream now, but it's. I think that they're on their way out, and it's probably going to happen after Infinity War, because I don't think it's going to be good. I really don't. I think there's too much going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's too
many players on the field.
Well, there's no good way to write it, is the thing. Like you can't write an individual story arc.
And that's where I think where TV shows could take over the genre in a sense, where like we were saying, movies, you have Avengers, and then you have to wait 3 years until you get the Avengers again, or 2 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
And they do their time where they have like individual stories in between, which build up to the next Avengers movie.
But then again, there's no stakes in that, because you know that, especially when it's come out and like, oh, Robert Downey Jr. signed on for such and such amount of movies. Well, it's like, well, fuck, he's not going to die in this one. Then I have nothing to worry about.
Well, I mean, do you really expect?
Well, there's no stakes, is what's becoming the issue. They've unfortunately, this is specifically for Marvel, they've built up the villain of Thanos so much that you feel like absolutely nothing is like threatening until you get to that point, which sucks because it takes out those movies individually. It automatically like demotes the villains from those movies. Right. It's like, oh, well, this had like Red Skull or something like that. He's nothing compared to this guy. Well, then why
did we waste our time?
Why did I even watch this instead of just to fork over money and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, and I think because they see this trend ending, now they're trying to push out movies faster and faster and faster, which is bad because it's also wearing the audience out really quickly, so it's making the trend stop or come to an end sooner. But they're also like, we have an end goal. We've made a commitment to make these movies. We need to get these out before the end of this trend comes, because the worst thing they can do in their mind is they've invested billions of dollars into the MCU, and we'll probably talk about the DC universe later maybe, but they've invested all this money into the time and story for this universe, and their main goal is Infinity War, and what they're doing afterwards, if they do anything afterwards, is whatever. Like, I don't think Infinity War, to me, I haven't read the comics, so I don't know kind of what goes on in that universe. But to me, that seems like the end-all, be-all. Like, Thanos is like the big bad guy of the universe.
They've built it up to be the end game, to the point where you're like, well, what the hell? Where do you go after that?
Right. So I think that's where their MCU ends, like their main MCU. Like they don't really focus on your main characters. They might do like Squirrel Girl or something like that afterwards, or something just like small stuff. I forgot where this train was going.
To me, it's kind of like the monster movie genre. Monster movie genres were like huge in the 80s and early 90s. Like there was like Anaconda, Boa versus Python, all those crazy, just terrible, absolutely terrible movies. But they did so well because of the spectacle of them. There's more or less no plot. But at the same time, people loved to go see those. And then they started to bomb and started to go downhill. So they just basically tried to liquidate their assets and get all this shit coming out at one time to try and make as much money as fast as they could before it died out. Kind of like the Westerns also. And now you start to see a huge resurgence of those type of movies, like with Sharknado. Sharknado, what have they made, like 4 or 5 now?
I wouldn't be surprised if there's 6. I haven't seen a single one, but...
They're good in a bad way, though. Like, they know what they are. So I think that in that kind of sense, that comic book movies are going to be going out very, very soon. And that in a few years maybe they'll have some sort of...
They'll just reboot everything.
Well, that's what they've done for comic books, like throughout history. Like they've been like, oh, well, let's just start over. Like for DC, the New 52 just completely rebranded everything.
And that's why I think that if this genre, the superhero genre overall, is going to survive long term, they need to move and focus more on TV shows and focus on a huge cinematic events. Like maybe in a sense that you go and you watch, you know, the Avengers TV show, and they do 2 seasons or whatever, and then they have a huge movie after the 2 years, and that's the Avengers movie. And then you go back and it's the Avengers TV show and with the same actors, you know, translated on the screen. Because I think when you have a TV show, you're able to tell, you know, TV shows have this advantage of they can spread a story out longer and they can go more in detail and they can focus more on character depth and build characters up and world build and they can do all this stuff over a period of time and make it matter.
Yeah.
Whereas a movie, it's like you have a 2.5 hour window where you have to set up, you have to build everything and you have to pay everything off. Whereas
you have to write it. You have to write it as a movie,
right?
Which is less like a comic book than a TV show can be.
Right. So you have TV shows. You know, depending on where you're looking, you have 26 episodes ish. You know, so that's a long period of time where, like you said, each episode could be an issue of a comic book.
Yes, or something like that. I agree. Where it could be like something where this is just like specifically, we could have like Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. Like they're gonna have their own TV shows.
Netflix is the perfect platform for right now.
And then instead of having a Defenders TV show, that would be the time to do a movie. To do a movie based on that.
I can see that.
And really as long as they market the TV shows right, they'll get such a following base with those that will overlap into the movie.
See, but I know what you're saying, that you would do that with different properties. Netflix in particular, that would be great if they did just a Defenders movie.
Or if they just did a Netflix movie.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They probably wouldn't put it to the movie theater. They'd probably just put it Netflix alone. But I think Netflix, honestly, they've set the standard for what comic book TV shows could be and should be.
Absolutely. Because a lot of people like Flash, Arrow, Supergirl. I think it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Because it's on cable TV.
Well, yeah, in that budget.
Cable TV is notoriously bad for absolutely terrible budgets and absolutely terrible writing. Whereas for Netflix, for the Netflix original shows that have come out, they've been fantastic. Most of them are buying other properties from these other people. Like you were talking specifically about Stranger Things before the podcast.
Go ahead.
But that was originally made by just the 2 guys, and then they took it to a festival, and then Netflix bought. So many people turned down the rights.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think like actual TV studios turned down the rights,
and then Netflix is like, we'll take that, and now it's a huge success. So it's done really well. So stuff like that, I feel like specifically Disney can benefit from doing something like that because it's on its way out. Obviously, they have to see it through now. They really do. But I feel like when they get to the end of that, they could do something where they transfer those characters into TV shows of some type, or kill them off in a efficient way, or have them retire, or something like that. Have something where you don't have to carry on the legacy of that individual character. Like specifically, Iron Man can be anyone because it's a fucking suit of armor. There's Tony Stark is the one in that.
Right.
Captain America is an idea. It can be someone else. So they could do stuff like that. But for certain characters like the Hulk, they can't. They can't do stuff like that. So they'd have to say like, oh, well, he went into exile, or he threw himself into the sun, or something like that.
I mean, the only thing I could think of maybe, and I usually cringe at the idea of rebooting series, especially whenever it's so soon afterwards. My idea would be like you have your cinematic universe, and it comes to an end, and you know they write everyone off into the sunset, however, death or whatever. And then you have to wait a period of time, of course, because it would be really jarring for, you know, oh, Tony Stark.
Like next month.
Yeah, it's like Tony Stark flew off into the sunset. It's over. The story's written off. It's done. Okay, now watch this TV show with a different Tony Stark. That's going to be our new TV cinematic universe. And so, you know, there definitely have to be some gap there, but, you know, making that transition, I think, is the only way where this genre could survive long term. And it has to be something where studios have to feel confident enough to give them an actual budget and let them have free reign. Like the thing with cable TV, and God help it, hopefully it can figure it out sooner or later that advertising. I say this as an advertising major. They focus too much on we can't upset the advertisement companies because they're the ones giving the budgets to the show.
Yep. They try to make things too toned down.
Right.
They don't respect the source material most of the time.
They have to respect late night television.
Yep.
And advertisers should realize that going into it, like, hey, this is going to be a lot darker.
Which is why
story.
Netflix is perfect for this kind of stuff, because it's like we can say literally whatever we want or do more or less whatever we want.
Netflix is great, and I love it to death. I worry that it might start something that might scare me a little bit, and that Netflix, you pay $8 a month and you get all these exclusive shows. I don't want to live in a world where I'm paying $8 a month to, like CBS, ABC, Fox. Now all of a sudden everyone has these exclusive services that you have to pay $12 a month, $11 a month, and now you have to keep track of all these different services that I'm now having monthly payments to.
Yeah.
And that concerns me in the sense, like, that just seems like it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
You're already having to choose between Netflix exclusives, and then do I want to get Hulu to get their exclusives? Do I want to get HBO and get their exclusives? So there's already a lot of different options out there, and I don't want now the market to be flooded with more exclusive only on our sub platform.
Yeah, that could definitely be.
It could spiral out of control really quickly and kill an industry.
It could, but at the same time, I don't think that they would go. The thing is competition is important.
Mm-hmm.
Competition is what keeps everything going. And there's so much other stuff on these other networks, not just these TV shows for comic book stuff. Like, there's so many other just like sitcoms, game shows, sports networks.
Mm-hmm.
So this stuff already exists. So that could happen. But I don't think it will, and because they know that as soon as they start something like that, everyone goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go down, everyone goes down. They don't want that, because they want to still be able to try and keep the money flowing. Keep that money flowing, essentially.
Right.
So, it could happen. I hope that it doesn't also. But getting specifically more back to comics and going now into DC, where I think DC...
missed the boat.
I think they missed the boat, but let me explain why. I think they missed the boat because they saw the end of it coming so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think they missed the boat because they're on their way out. Comic book movies, in my opinion, they're on their way out. So DC is like, well, we're gonna get our 5 cents in before it dies out. So they figured basically to just jump into these start-off movies instead of doing origin stories for the most part. They're basically just jumping into these big event movies to try and get people in there for the spectacle. Because that's what the competition is.
They saw, like, Avengers had made how much?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, let's do Justice League. It's like, they see that, like, okay. They see the big number, like, oh, shit, they made billions of dollars. But they didn't see all the work Marvel put into building that up.
Like, for Suicide Squad and for Batman vs. Superman, and even for Man of Steel. I liked Man of Steel, but for those 3 movies... the action sequences were amazing. They were so good. The stories is where it started to lack. Mm-hmm. And now, from what I see, it's starting to go a similar way in Marvel, where they're focusing a lot less on the story, and they're focusing way too much on set pieces and the action moments of that. So I think that in a way, they're kind of becoming what like Fast and Furious and Transformers movies are, where story and stuff is like, it exists, but it's basically not there.
It's not the primary
exactly goal. The reason you go there is for tits and ass and cars and explosions.
I go there. I like the only I get made fun of for liking these movies. I like the Transformers and the Fast and Furious because it's definitely a movie where I can go in
and turn
my brain off and just have fun.
Yep.
Like, I'm not constantly like, oh, what's gonna happen? I'm not on the edge of my seat worrying like, oh, is the main character gonna die here or anything like that. I can just sit back and laugh and be like, oh, that was pretty fucking cool. Oh, they just flipped a car. Okay, cool. Like, how'd they do that? That's sweet. Whereas, I enjoy movies that, they go into depth with story, like Christopher Nolan. What a wonderful storyteller. Any movie he does, like, it's just nothing but good story, and it's raw story, and you have to pay attention or you lose out. Mm-hmm. And I as someone that doesn't read the comics, it doesn't necessarily bother me as much that it's just set pieces, because I'm someone that enjoys action movies, just turning my brain off, and that's something with these movies that I can kind of just do and still like them and enjoy them. Like seeing Hulk smash things like a billion times, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I've basically given up on them trying to get things accurate, because it's like they'll just do whatever the hell they want, honestly. But I feel like because it's really affecting in Marvel, because they've more or less set the gold standard for what these comic book movies are, like specifically Iron Man, Captain America 2. Like those, and Avengers, those 3 movies specifically are just great movies, because it's not just revolving around those individual like set pieces and explosions and stuff. It's a lot about the story. And then you get these other movies like Thor 2, and even Age of Ultron wasn't that good. I went back and rewatched it. The story is pretty bad. And then for me, I thought Civil War was not as good on the story. It could have been much better. So they're starting to make a shift in the way that they're making the movies, where they're not focusing on... They're almost focusing too much on the special effects and the spectacle part, so that they're missing the human element, which is what makes a lot of the comics great.
Right.
Is that you're able to see these crazy people with like these amazing abilities in the same situations that you or me are in and stuff like that. And that's what makes the comics so interesting. It's not just like, oh, he smashed dog, that's cool. Like, that's not what made them so successful. Like, specifically for the Walking Dead comic, there's not a whole lot of action all the time. There are times where you can go like an entire issue with like no action happening, but it's about the circumstances that are going on. Like, you're able to see these people under pressure in like this world you'd never see.
And that's why I think it's really like, that's why I love when things world build and character build intensely, to where they put a lot of intention into that, because that especially whenever I'm not a professional writer by any standard, but the way I go about things is I like building a world and the characters and just throwing shit at them and just, okay, I have the rules for this world and I have the rules for this character. How would this character react to whatever the hell I throw at him?
Yeah.
And to me, that's how the story should be born, or a story is born, a good believable one. And I see your point where it's like, after a while, it would get old just to see Hulk smashing a billion things. And, these are very, the story in the comics, I'm sure, are very in-depth, but they have like 1,000 issues they can build upon and stuff like that.
Well, think about how, like, for the press conferences and stuff before Civil War, what were they talking about? The airport scene. They're talking about this scene. They're not focusing on what the movie was at its heart was about. It was about this conflict between 2 friends.
Well, then at that point, that should point in the direction of what they see, or and whenever they make these movies,
what they think the fans want.
What they think the fans want, but they go in and they do research. They have to do market research and all this stuff, right. And so they're going to test screenings, or they're polling fans of these movies, and like, okay, so you've watched all these movies, what are your favorite parts of the Avengers? And the fans are saying when they fight, and they're writing that down. It's like, okay, so they're not paying attention to the story that's being told. They're paying attention to whenever the Avengers are working together and beating the hell out of wherever the enemy is. So whenever they see that's like, okay, so our main focus, our main budget is going to go towards what our research is telling us that the fans are watching it for. And that's unfortunate, because they're basing their movie off statistics, which
is notoriously risky.
It's risky, but it's proven in other areas. I don't know about movies necessarily, but it does become risky in a sense of sometimes people just want a really good story. I just don't know how many times you can see
someone beat the crap out of each other.
Well, that too, but how many different stories can you tell with a person with superpowers fighting someone? It's essentially every single superhero, they have different powers, but their origin stories are pretty similar in the sense they follow a certain guideline where they're bad, they're losers, like they're not really popular people. Something happens to them, everything changes for them, their life changes. Then they have to figure out how their powers work, and then they have some enemy that comes along who beats the crap out of them,
and then they build up, rebel,
and then they go back. So it's like essentially every single superhero
movie. It gets
movie,
very stale.
It can be, So, I think that's why they see, like, okay, so every single movie we've been putting out, every single origin story, everything like this, or these solo movies, they're essentially the same movie, just with different different characters in them. We need to shift focus and try to make it something that people are excited to see.
Yeah.
And can like, oh, get him. Okay, switching to now Vision blowing the shit out of some guy in the sky. Okay, switch to Ant-Man turning big. Okay, switch to like all these fast camera angles. So everyone, they get their fan stories like, oh, look at Captain America beating the crap out of Spider-Man. And like I can see why they've made these decisions for these movies, and I can also see why they're not, like, you don't like them, or they're not popular decisions. So I kind of in the middle where it's like, okay,
there's no good way to do it either way.
And I think that might be just, like we were talking with video games earlier, it's every year. So like if the movies are spread out,
they have to force themselves to innovate.
Right. So if
very unprofessional. Very unprofessional.
If they were to fuck. Wow. Okay, so imagine time to, like, we live forever.
Time is a flat circle.
Imagine we live forever. In a perfect world,
what a nightmare.
These movies wouldn't be coming out every single year.
And they also wouldn't be timeless.
And so, between each movie, if say there was a 2-year gap between Iron Man and Iron Man 2, or Iron Man and the origin story for some other superhero, there would be time to forget how similar these origin stories are to each other. And I think that would make for people like, accepting how common that these origins are. Yeah. Or these stories being told are.
I mean, a huge problem of it is the way that they're released. The way the comics are released is each individual issue for that character. So 1 month you can have an issue for Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, whatever, Batman. You can have so many different single issues. So in theory, if you wanted to rebrand everything, you could do 6 origin stories in 1 month. And no one would care, because the next issue would be all different things.
Okay, so I see that. So you would want to get everything out of the way.
Yeah, so when you're making movies and you're introducing an entirely new character, it's still set in like 2 years. It's like, oh, we get this guy's story. Oh, and then we get this guy's story, but it's kind of similar to the last guy's story, but it's 2 years later. And then we go to the next guy's story, and it's similar to his and his. What the hell? It's the same story. So that is a huge issue, and just the medium transfer. When you go from something that comes out bi-monthly to something that comes out bi-yearly, there's a huge gap there and a huge problem, especially when you have sometimes the same director or the same crew working on a different film for a different person the next year. So that's a huge issue. And even for, what the hell was it? For the Harry Potter movies, they had that issue too, where they're introducing new characters and stuff in each book, not the same ones, obviously. Like, Harry obviously is introducing the first one. But in, like, a different movie, they'll introduce, like, I don't know, Harry Potter.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying.
But they would introduce someone new, and it'd be like, well, it's like the same damn story he had. It's just frustrating when you're trying to introduce new characters in something that's already established, and their stories are pretty similar. And it almost seems lazy, although it may not intentionally be set that way.
And maybe that's just the byproduct of anytime you transfer something from a written medium into a visual medium, there's inevitably going to be... I don't think I've ever seen a movie that's better than a book that I've read. I honestly, I can't think of one.
I have an answer to that, because that question comes up so often, but I can't think of what it is.
I can maybe say Holes, because when I read Holes, I had no clue what was going on. I didn't know about going back into the future.
Was a good movie.
And it was a really good movie. But other than that, for the most part, like Aragon, I know you liked Aragon. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
I thought you liked the movie.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
They're both bad.
I love the books. That movie destroyed my childhood. Yeah. It was awful. And it killed... And it's like, how could they mess that up? Like, watching the movie, it's like, why'd they skip that? Why'd they skip that? Why'd they skip that? Why'd they add this? Why is that in there? That didn't happen. And it's like, why is it so hard to transfer from a medium where literally the script is written in 600 pages, and then all of a sudden it turns into a mess on the screen? It's just like, and that I guess I could go in studio influence, but we don't have enough time to.
Oh yes, we do.
Do we have? You want to go into studio influence right now?
We're going to go into it a little bit.
Okay.
But back to the point of why'd they add this, why'd they take that out and stuff like that, and the 600-page script right in front of you. That's absolutely bullshit. 600-page script would be fucking ludicrous.
Well, no. That's what I'm not saying, like, you copy word for word.
No, I know. But, like, a lot of that is impossible to film. Most of the time, it's based on budget. Sometimes it's based on time, where it's just like, oh, there's this amazing set piece and stuff. We'll just put it in CGI. CGI is expensive. It's extremely expensive. And a lot of movies like that, especially if they're taking a gamble on a product like Aragon, like, that's a huge gamble.
That's a best-selling book.
That doesn't matter, though. That's a huge gamble to take something like that up as a product that they're doing. Like, for Hunger Games, I didn't like it, but people loved it because they stayed a lot more faithful to the book and stuff like that. But then that gets into the individual studios and who's producing it. Because the producers have to pitch everything. So they have to pitch exactly what they want. And then the investors have to go, okay, well, that's good, but let's take that out and cut down a few pages of script and get this person to act in it, and then we'll put the money in it. That's a lot of freaking exceptions you have to take to that.
Yeah, and
there's no good key to fit the hole. You basically just have to freaking Jimmy lock it with a paper clip or 2 paper clips. So there's no good way to do that. But a lot of the time with studio influence, it's solely so they can make more money. That's why there's more PG-13 movies than there are R movies.
And that's kind of sad.
It's a huge disgrace.
I think we're going to start seeing that turn here soon, because we've had some good rated R movies come out recently that have been making a lot of money, and I think maybe it will be time for them to realize, like, hey, there's an audience out there that millennials are now of age to where they can go out and see these movies by themselves, or not have to go with their parents or whatever.
You don't know this, but you're talking about comic book movies. R movies as a genre are notoriously bad. Great R movies out there. Halloween, John Carpenter's The Thing, stuff like that. All those great horror movies, slasher flicks and stuff like that, they're great. But they didn't do well commercially because there are movies. And you don't get as many people to go see that.
Right.
Because what happens on Friday nights and Saturday nights? All the teenage hipsters go out with their parents' money after getting dropped off at the local mall. And then they go see the movie that they can pay to see.
Or they pay to see the movie and then...
But they'll sneak into the other one. But it doesn't matter because they didn't pay to go see that. So they don't get the proceeds of that.
And maybe...
Which is a lot bigger problem than people realize that. That's a huge problem.
And I think this is maybe... Yeah, we're running short on time.
We're good.
But, you know, I brought this up to you later, is I think movie theaters have run their course.
I think in certain senses they absolutely have.
Like, you know, there are definitely movies where you need to see them in theaters. We sucks Interstellar's dick a lot. That was a movie you have to see in theaters. Martian was one you had to see in theaters. There are definitely movies in particular that I can think of where...
Event movies, right. Event movies. Movies that you are going to offer a completely different experience than you can see at home. Especially when you're seeing it with a crowd. Right.
There are other movies where it doesn't matter where that... You could watch it on an airplane, you could watch it at home, you could watch it at your grandmother's house. It doesn't matter.
Fast and Furious,
Transformers, comic book movies. You know, there's the artsy fartsy movies that come out all the time that win all the awards for some reason. You know, these are the movies where it doesn't matter where you're going to see, because visually it's not something that's going to blow your mind, or audio is not something that's going to blow your mind. And if they would cut out the middleman, if the studios would cut out the middleman and stop sending them to theaters, and like, oh, box office is where people hear word of mouth, and they start distributing them themselves, I think they could make a lot more money that way.
Yeah.
And a lot more people will see them, because there's movies in the theaters right now I would really love to see. Like, I want to see a Star Trek movie. I want to see the new Jason Bourne movie. You said Suicide Squad's bad. I want to see Suicide Squad still.
Sausage Party
I want to see.
It's a great movie.
But I'm not going to the theaters to see it. Just because, like, I don't want to... It's a 15 to 20 minute drive, and I have to look to see what the show times are.
There's a hassle.
It's a hassle involved, and I would much rather go to the movie studio's website and buy the movie, or pay to rent the movie for however long.
And they could take the base ticket price and add a convenience fee to that. Because so many people are like, they have to buy a babysitter. They have to do such and such just to have a night to go out.
Right.
So instead of doing that, they offer a higher ticket, essentially, or the option to buy it immediately, or rent it, and then as soon as they want it to be bought, then it'll basically unlock, and then you can get to it. Although hackers, I'm sure, would find a fucking wall through that. But anyway, they could do something like that, and they could make a significant amount of money without having to destroy what the theaters have set up already, because there are people that rely on their jobs for that.
Well, I mean, like, but that goes into a whole, like, an economics thing where...
I'm just...
Yeah. Like, you can't...
That's not me being like, oh, we need to help them. That's just... I'm just making an observation.
Yeah, just like... But, it's something where I hope... Like, we don't work in the industry, so we don't know what... Or at least I don't know what main industry people are thinking. Like, I don't know if that's something that's on their mind.
I don't think they know what they're thinking.
I hope they are thinking of that. Or they have that in mind where we can... This is an option we should at least consider going forward. And I honestly think they could make a lot more money that way. Because, I mean, I don't know what kind of cut movie theaters take. Or I assume the movie theaters pay a premium to buy the rights for the movies for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that whole process goes. But I just imagine, like, I think too, people are really excited for, their video game movies coming out now. It's going to probably be the new thing, I imagine, in the future. Maybe. It has potential. It seriously, I think it really does have potential.
We were talking about that a couple of weeks ago, about, like, what would take over after comic book movies.
I think video game movies have a chance here.
I think you're right. And they don't have to necessarily have crossovers either, although if they could, which they'd have to be within the same company. That could be something pretty interesting.
But, I don't see gamers who are stereotypically people that don't leave their homes. It sounds bad, but they're stereotypically people that don't go out into public or anything like that. It still sounds really bad. I'm not trying to diss video game. I'm one myself.
Although that's changing because millennials are getting outside and getting older, as you say.
But, people aren't going out. Like, a big part where I went to go see the Warcraft movie, and a big part of why I didn't want to go out and see it is because of the stigma that comes alongside Warcraft and everything. And so it was a big thing where it's like,
Mom, bathroom.
It's like, am I going to be considered like this outcast person because I'm going out and seeing a movie about a video game that I enjoyed or video games? And it was definitely something where it's like, maybe I don't want to see this movie. And that's when I started thinking, like, why can't I just have it streamed to me?
Yeah.
And I think that if they would do that, those games or those movies would actually bring people in or see them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have no idea what's going to happen in the next couple years.
I'm calling it
for those
video game movies.
I think no matter what, that we're going to see some huge changes in how movies are marketed, how movies are consumed, not eaten.
Yum.
And how the people are able to, like, receive them, like, in terms of, like, oh, we like this, we don't like that, and then they'll have to take that feedback because they'll more or less be forced to. So I think we're going to see huge changes and stuff probably within the next 5 years.
I can see that.
I would say.
I look forward to the changing in the marketing of movies, because hopefully that's whenever I'm getting into the field of marketing and advertising, and I can, yeah.
Well, that would be great, though, like, if there was a way where you could kind of keep the other stuff alive, but at the same time work a lot on the new stuff, like being able to just get a movie at home, like the day that it comes out, not freaking like Fios where it's like, oh, it was released 2 months ago. It's like, okay, I could have just went to go see it then. Instead, just do it then. Do it at the same time. Make it more expensive. People will pay it.
And I wonder if maybe the box, because box office numbers are like, they're a huge thing to boast. Like, oh, we're number one in the box office right now. And
we're number one on Netflix.
I have to wonder if their reason for holding off there is because that is such a major point for their marketing. Like, anytime you see a new trailer, it's like number one first opening weekend or something like that, or number one this weekend.
Or if you're Batman vs Superman and your reviews are so bad, you're literally quoting Twitter.
Didn't they say like number one in like some random county or something? Like, they got really specific.
Well, I don't remember that, but I remember they said like some person's name. It was like Mr. Fuzzy Balls or something. Something stupid like that. Some Twitter name says, it's the best movie ever. It's like, it's bad when it gets to that.
Yeah. So, I mean...
But like, even that, in and of itself, is they're using something else that's not mainstream to support their claim.
And hopefully it becomes more popular, because who gives a shit about box office numbers, honestly? Like,
yeah.
It definitely, like, box office numbers to me, or I guess... Second week box office numbers are where to really look, because...
And the consumers don't give a shit about that. But that's where the studios make their money.
Right. But, like,
right now.
If whenever you look at opening weekend box office numbers, to me that just tells you how much should you pay your marketing team.
Yep.
Because if you could have the worst movie you could have a piece of shit, Suicide Squad, and just have it marketed
that
very
movie
well.
Had such a freaking drop off in week 2.
Exactly. So it did so well opening. Oh, I don't know how well
it did pretty well.
It did pretty good opening weekend, and then just watching that decline week 2, that says a lot about your movie. And hopefully they get the idea that maybe box office numbers aren't the way to advertise your movie, and they go on to other things.
Mostly social media is important because that's what it was. That's what kept the freaking Star Wars train rolling like all winter. That was just going like freaking crazy. But
and that, I mean, you have to be careful with because social media isn't something you can control trailers. I assume when you say like, okay, here's our trailer, we want it shown X amount of time, or this is the frequency, is where we want to see it, so you can somewhat control it. Social media, once it gets out there, it's great because it's free advertisement, but you also lose all control over the amount of hype that people are sending and what the message people are saying. Like,
and people can edit it and put it on YouTube now. They can make all these different parodies and stuff. Some of them are really good. But
did you see the Beastie Boys one for Rogue One?
Sabotage?
Yeah, that was really good.
It was great. Anyway, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
A little bit long. Not too bad. Only a couple minutes long. But make sure to tune in to our next one, whenever that is.
Hopefully
and
soon.
I'm sure we'll talk about something that probably has to do with something.
Yeah, something about something. That's typically what podcasts are about.
All right. See you later, folks.
Bye.